Thomas Jefferson once wrote, "If a law is unjust, a man is not only right to disobey it, he is obligated to do so." And that didn't just originate with Thomas Jefferson. It goes back centuries in Western civilization, long before him, and was a bulwark against tyranny. But apparently, Governor Cuomo doesn't know that. Today, I'd like to read to you, first of all, his executive order, at least a portion of it, relating to the limitation of 10 people within a home. And then I want to talk about the arguments, briefly, an argument given by a sheriff of why he wouldn't enforce it, and then Governor Cuomo's response and why Governor Cuomo's response does not make sense, and then why it doesn't fit with the history of our nation. So first of all, let's look at this executive order, which is 202.74. It's a revision, amendment to previous executive orders. And I'm going to read to you just the part that deals with the 10 people. So this is hereby modified only insofar as to further limit non-essential private residential gatherings to 10, it says of fewer, but it means or fewer individuals for any lawful purpose or reason, provided that social distancing, face covering, and cleaning and disinfection protocols required by the Department of Health are adhered to. Okay, well, recently you may know that a judge from Fulton County, whose name was Richard Giardino, was interviewed by Fox, and he said that the reason he wouldn't enforce this is that it was unconstitutional, and he also didn't have the number of deputies that was necessary to actually enforce this. What was Governor Cuomo's response? He said, as you probably know, that a law enforcement agent has to enforce the law, okay, and doesn't have the right to decide which laws to enforce. And so he tried to use the example of, if the person believed that cocaine was okay, the sheriff, that he might not enforce that law, whereas he just enforce other laws, as if he would make arbitrary choices. And that seemed to be his argument, which I don't think fits at all with the case at hand, because the case at hand has to do with the fact that higher law always trumps lower law. When an official makes an oath to the Constitution, to uphold the Constitution and uphold the laws of the state, they are upholding those laws, except insofar as an edict might be made that is unconstitutional. And they have an obligation to the higher law. Now, this is why Jefferson, in a sense, said that a law that is unjust should not be obeyed. And this is the notion that goes back to the fact that the person who is supposed to enforce the law, let's say it's a sheriff or you name it, under the governor, that person is obligated to their oath of office to the Constitution. They're obligated to God and the Constitution of their country. They are therefore have to be able to decide whether or not a law given to them to enforce is unconstitutional. This is the idea of the lesser magistrate. That was the old term there, that the person who is a sheriff, police officer, or what have you, that person can't enforce anything unjust, or they're doing an unjust action. Of course, we know this with the Nazis, who said, oh, I was just following orders, okay? And no, they're blamed because what they were doing was unjust, despite the orders they were given, because those orders were unjust. Now, here is the sheriff saying, no, I think this is contrary to the Constitution, and therefore I can't keep it. Now, Governor Cuomo might say, as he kind of implies, you don't have a choice here. He makes it sound like one particular local law or another. It's not the issue. It's the higher law, okay, the higher law being the Constitution, as opposed to an executive order of the governor in this particular case. That sheriff is obligated to the higher law when the sheriff judges that the lower law conflicts with the higher law. Well, is Cuomo going to say then, you can't decide that? Like, who is going to decide that then? I guess it's Governor Cuomo. He's the one who gets to decide whether or not his law conflicts with the higher law. It doesn't make any sense. Because then it's like saying, my law, when I say it, I also get to decide that it is not in conflict with the Constitution, period. Let's go to a private example. Obviously, if you had let's say you have a son or daughter, all right? And, or let's say you are that son or daughter. They're 15, 16 years old. Parent tells them, I'm really getting tired of that barking dog next door, or, lawnmower, whatever it is that's making a lot of noise that's bothering me. And would you, when their garage is open next door, or whatever it is, just make sure you go get it. Go grab that dog. Maybe it's like, grab the dog, and we'll find a better home for the dog, the next door neighbor. Parent makes it sound real good. And we'll find a better home for that dog. Now, if you're 15, 16 years old, you're supposedly under the authority of your parents, right? Legally. But wouldn't you know that, look, I'm not supposed to obey that thing that the parent tells me. No, I'm supposed to follow the higher law, which is don't steal, right? In that case, you have to disobey your parent. Now, the parent might come back and say, well, I don't think so. I'm the one who gets to decide whether or not what I told you is in conflict with that higher law. I'm the one who gets to tell you that, in fact, what I'm telling you is not theft. I'm just telling you to go get the dog and give it to me. And I'm defining that as not being theft, because I'm saying it's go take it and give it to me. Not theft. Now, come on. We all know that doesn't work. That 15 or 16-year-old is still a rational human being going to say, no. They should say, no. What you're doing is you're disobeying that law. Don't do it, Mom or Dad. I'm not going to participate in this. So that's the same way it is with the sheriffs. They're saying, look, they have to be able to make a decision. Just like that kid has to be able to make a decision. I mean, you can't just say, oh, because Dad said it isn't in conflict with the law, I have to obey him. So these sheriffs can't say, just because Governor Cuomo said his executive order isn't in conflict with the Constitution, I have to obey it. No, they obviously are obligated to that higher law. They have to have the rational capacity, and they're put in that position to to make that determination themselves. Otherwise, why be obligated to the Constitution of the United States and to the laws? They're obligated when they make that oath to the Constitution, ultimately, as the higher law. So I think that Governor Cuomo is mistaken here. In fact, unfortunately, the kind of argument that he's making is the kind of argument that people would make in the past who were tyrannical. And that is that, in fact, my law is the law, and it goes, there is no higher law, period. Now, let's go back to the history of this a bit. I mean, this goes back for centuries, long before the Founding Fathers, and it's the basis of what they had to say. I'll bring you back to the more immediate future, and then we can go back further. Go back to the Protestant Reformation, for instance. Okay, there was this teaching called the lesser magistrate. All right, magistrate was another term for a person who was in office, and they were obligated because, according to the Protestant Reformation, they were appointed by God, and therefore they had a direct obligation to God to do what was right in their office and to follow those orders that came to them that were just and fair, but those that were unjust and immoral, they were obligated to disobey, actually. And so this was called the right of the lesser magistrate. And this was a basis of what went on in the 16th and then in the 16th, 17th, and 18th centuries. All right, so all the way up to the American Revolution, and the founders were in agreement with this. That's why the Continental Congress, okay, could agree that, hey, this higher authority, the king, was doing something that violates the rights of Englishmen, okay, the rights of English people. And so they said, look, that king's edicts is in violation of a higher law. And therefore, we have not only the right, but obligation to disobey, because we've been put in a position of authority and leadership to do what is right. And if they hadn't had that understanding, we wouldn't have had an American Revolution. If people had followed the reasoning that Governor Cuomo is giving, if they had followed that reasoning with reference to King George, they would have just had to say, whatever King George says is good, in spite of the fact that it might violate the rights of English people, that were guaranteed to Englishmen. So King George just defines what those are, period. And therefore we just have to go along with it. No, they didn't do that. And this goes back, this isn't just in the Protestant Reformation. This is in John Locke as well, very clearly. And John Locke sets forth what you have to do to present your, the problems you have with the ruler who is being tyrannical in this case. And that's exactly what they did in the Declaration of Independence. Now, you could go back for centuries before this into the Middle Ages. There was an understanding of this then as well. And in some ways, in Greek and Roman thinkers as well. In a private way, you can go all the way back to the play of Antigone, where she defied the king's orders. Now, doing this as a private person, because what the king had said was tyrannical, because it was contrary to the rule of natural law as she understood it, okay? The rule of the gods. So we find the same thing in people like Cicero, going way back for centuries, all these people influencing our founding fathers, being the basis of our American Constitution, an understanding of what it is to be a nation. And so I think that Governor Cuomo is out of accord with all of that. And I think he should reconsider this and realize this is the land of liberty